I remember the day I first met Eve, my boss's wife. It was a Tuesday morning at the office. I was at my desk sorting through paperwork when my boss, Michael Hastings, walked in with a striking woman by his side. I recognized her from a photo on his desk. In person, she was poised and graceful, with bright, intelligent eyes that seemed to notice everything. Michael introduced us with a proud smile. "This is Claire, one of our excellent project managers," he said. "Claire, meet my wife, Evelyn." I stood and shook her hand, hoping I looked composed despite the sudden flutter in my stomach. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Hastings," I managed politely. She gave a warm laugh. "Please call me Eve. I've heard great things about you." Her kindness put me at ease. We exchanged a few words about the company and the charity project she was involved in, and then Michael led her on to meet others. As they walked away, I found myself watching her. There was something magnetic about Eve, not just her beauty, but the genuine warmth she showed everyone. Over the next few weeks, Eve became a regular presence around the office, coordinating a charity initiative our company supported. Each time she appeared, I felt nervous and excited. I'm usually private at work, especially as a lesbian in a fairly conservative company. But something about Eve made me feel seen. We would chat briefly, small talk and smiles, but those moments became the highlights of my day. I told myself she was just being friendly, that she was like that with everyone. Still, I couldn't deny how my heart quickened around her. One stormy evening, I ended up working late, preparing a client presentation. Almost everyone had left to avoid the coming storm, but I stayed, lost in my task. Rain pounded the windows and thunder rumbled in the distance. I nearly jumped out of my chair when I looked up to see Eve standing in the office doorway, closing a dripping umbrella. "Claire, you're still here," she asked, surprised to find me alone. I smiled sheepishly, just wrapping up some work. The storm caught me by surprise. Eve stepped inside, droplets of rain sparkling on her coat. "I was out at a dinner, and Michael suggested I wait here until the weather clears," she said. "I was about to make some tea. Would you like to join me?" "It's nicer than waiting alone." My pulse skipped. "Tea sounds great," I replied. In the break room, the office was hushed and dim after hours. We brewed a pot of tea and settled at the small table. The building was quiet around us, the windows streaked with rain. At first, we talked about little things, how unpredictable the weather had been, the project I was working on, but soon the conversation grew more personal. Eve told me a funny story about the dinner she'd attended, doing an impression of a snobby patron that made me snort tea through my nose. We both laughed, and she gently handed me a napkin, her eyes shining with mirth. I realized how easy it was to talk to her as if we were old friends. When our mugs were empty and the storm finally calmed, we walked to the elevators together. Before I stepped in, she touched my arm lightly. "Drive safe, Claire. And don't work too hard, okay?" There was a caring, almost intimate tone in her voice that made my breath catch. "I'll try," I promised softly. "Good night, Eve." "Good night," she replied, and the elevator doors slid closed between us. On the drive home, my mind was in a haze. That simple touch on my arm replayed over and over. By the time I reached my apartment, I knew I was in deep trouble. Eve was my boss's wife, far out of bounds, and yet I felt an undeniable pull toward her. That night, I lay in bed, unable to sleep, the scent of jasmine tea still on my senses, and the memory of her laughter lingering in my ears. I told myself it was just a harmless crush, born of loneliness and admiration. I had no idea the path I just stepped onto would change my life forever. Quick reminder, if you're enjoying this story, hit subscribe to Sapphic Tales so you don't miss the next one. Despite my efforts to remain professional, I couldn't stop thinking about Eve after that night. Every time she visited the office, my pulse raced. About a week later, Eve stopped by my desk around noon, surprising me with a latte from the cafe downstairs. "I remembered you like caramel," she said with a shy smile as she handed me the cup. I was touched she remembered such a small detail. We chatted for a moment, and then she asked if I'd help with a charity gala planning meeting that weekend. "I could use your organizational skills," she said. "And it would be nice to have a friend there." Friend. The word was both comforting and a little disappointing. Still, I agreed to help on Saturday. She left me her number and the meeting details. All week, I looked forward to Saturday with a mix of nerves and excitement. Saturday arrived, and I joined Eve and a few volunteers at a community center to plan the gala. For a couple of hours, we brainstormed and organized. It was wonderful to see Eve in her element, enthusiastic, creative, and encouraging to everyone's ideas. When the meeting wrapped up and the others left, I stayed behind to help her clean up. As we collected papers and empty cups, our conversation turned personal. Eve admitted that Michael didn't pay much attention to her charity work. "He supports it financially, but he kind of sees it as my little hobby," she said, rolling her eyes with a sad smile. I offered a sympathetic look. "It's important work. And you're amazing at it. Anyone can see that." She sighed, wiping a table absent-mindedly. "Sometimes I feel like he doesn't really see me at all. It gets lonely." Her voice faltered. My heart ached. "You deserve to be seen, Eve," I said softly, "for who you are." She met my eyes then, and I felt a connection like a physical current between us. "Claire," she whispered, stepping closer. Before I could overthink, I gently took her hand. "You're not alone," I said. My voice was barely above a whisper, but she heard it. Eve's eyes filled with emotion. In the quiet of that empty room, the last barriers between us crumbled. She reached up, fingers trembling, and lightly touched my cheek. I closed my eyes at the warmth of her hand. When I opened them, she was so close I could feel her breath. I don't know who moved first. Suddenly her lips were on mine. The kiss was soft, hesitant for just a moment, then all the longing we'd held back came rushing out. I wrapped my arms around her as the kiss deepened, months of loneliness and unspoken feelings pouring into that embrace. Her hands slid around my neck, and she sighed against my mouth like she'd been holding her breath for years. When we finally parted, we were both shaking. Eve looked at me with a mix of wonder and fear. I'm sorry," she stammered, though she didn't step away. "Don't be," I murmured, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. My heart was soaring. "I'm not." Just then, her phone buzzed loudly on the table, making us jump. Michael's name flashed on the screen. With a fearful glance at me, Eve silenced the call. Reality came crashing back. She swallowed hard. "I have to go," she said quietly. "He's expecting me home." My stomach clenched, but I forced a reassuring nod. "Of course." I understand." Eve squeezed my hand, her eyes pleading. "Can I see you tomorrow?" "Just to talk about everything." "Yes," I answered immediately. "Tomorrow." We agreed to meet at a small coffee shop at 10 a.m. Outside, the afternoon sun had broken through the clouds, the air fresh from the earlier rain. I walked her to her car. Before getting in, she squeezed my hand once more. So much was said in that brief touch and the searching look we shared. We both knew our lives had just changed in irrevocable ways. I watched her drive off, my lips still tingling from our kiss. My world felt turned upside down, but I was happier than I could ever remember. We had crossed a forbidden line, and there were countless uncertainties ahead. But one thing was clear, we weren't alone in this. Eve felt the same way I did, and that made anything seem possible. Just a quick pause. If you're enjoying this, hit that subscribe button and stay with us here on Sapphic Tales. We met the next morning as planned. Sitting across from Eve in the quiet corner of a coffee shop, I was nervous. What if she regretted everything? But as soon as she arrived and gave me a tiny, anxious smile, relief washed over me. She reached across the table to take my hand in hers openly. We talked for hours in hushed tones. Eve confessed that she'd felt alone in her marriage for years. Falling in love with me had been as much of a surprise to her as it was to me. "I never imagined this would happen," she said, eyes glistening. But I also never knew I could feel this way. I squeezed her hand. Me neither. I admitted how I'd been terrified of my feelings at first, afraid not just because she was married, but because I didn't want to ruin her life or mine. We both knew the situation wasn't simple. She was Mrs. Hastings to the world, and I was her husband's employee. If our secret came out, the fallout could be huge. So we made a pact that morning. We would move forward together, carefully. Eve wasn't ready to append her marriage overnight, and I understood. We would take it day by day, in secret, until the time was right. It was risky, but our hearts told us it was worth it. What followed were some of the happiest weeks of my life, and the most stressful. With Michael often busy or out of town, Eve and I managed to steal time together whenever we could. We met for coffee on her free mornings, took afternoon walks in a park far from the office where no one knew us, and on a couple of occasions, she spent the night at my apartment under the pretense of visiting an old college friend. Once, we even spent an afternoon at a botanical garden outside the city, strolling hand in hand where no one knew us. In those moments alone, we could simply be two women in love. The laughter, the tender kisses, waking up with her head on my shoulder, it was pure bliss. Yet living a double life was exhausting. At work, I had to pretend nothing was different, even as my heart fluttered whenever I caught a glimpse of Eve. I grew hypervigilant. Did anyone notice how quickly I answered her emails, or the way my face lit up when her name popped up on my phone? I worried my feelings were obvious, but I hoped I was hiding it well. Eve was more poised in public. She'd had years of practice putting on a happy facade. But even she slipped up once or twice. She later told me that at home, lying next to Michael, she sometimes almost whispered my name in her sleep. Each small deception and close call added more strain. There were a few near misses. One evening, the company hosted a cocktail party for a new client. Spouses were invited, so Eve attended on Michael's arm. Seeing her there, I felt a pang of jealousy and sadness. We had to mingle separately and could only steal glances across the room. Every time our eyes met, it was like a secret message passing between us. During the party, Eve excused herself to get some air on the terrace. After a minute, I followed. Hidden in the shadows, we stood close, our hands brushing where no one could see. "This is harder than I imagined," she whispered. "I know," I whispered back. It took all my willpower not to kiss her right there, but anyone could have walked out. We returned separately. I thought we had been discreet, but later that night, Michael stopped me. He was genial on the surface, thanking me for my hard work, but something in his eyes made my stomach twist. "I saw you talking with Eve earlier," he said casually. "She really enjoys your company. I'm glad she has someone to chat with when I'm busy." I forced a smile, feeling a bead of sweat between my shoulders. "Eve is great. We were just talking about the charity event." He held my gaze a second too long before nodding. "Good. Keep up the good work, Claire." Driving home, I couldn't shake the feeling he suspected something. When I relayed it to Eve later, she tried to reassure me. "Maybe he's just being his usual controlling self," she said. "We'll be extra careful. Don't forget, every week we share new tales. Subscribe to Sapphic Tales so you're always the first to hear them." Despite close calls, our bond grew stronger. Late one night in my apartment, after we'd loved each other slowly and sweetly, we lay tangled together under the covers. Eve rested her head on my chest, and I felt tears on my skin. "I can't keep hiding like this forever," she whispered. I hate lying to everyone, to him. I stroked her hair, heart aching. Claire, she said softly, lifting her head to look at me. Her eyes shone. I love you. It was the first time she'd spoken those words. My breath caught. A smile broke across my face even as my own tears welled up. I love you too, I whispered. We lay there, foreheads touching, both happy and terrified. Saying it out loud made it even more real. We knew we couldn't live in secrets forever. Eve talked about finding a way to end her marriage, though the idea scared her. I promised I would be by her side. We didn't have a plan yet, but we started to imagine a future where we could be together openly. The breaking point came one Friday evening. Michael had grown increasingly suspicious, and the truth finally exploded. He called me into his office at the end of the day. The floor was nearly empty. I entered to find him standing by the window, rigid. On his desk, I noticed a few photographs spread out. My stomach lurched as I recognized them. Eve and I on a park bench, heads close. Another was a grainy shot of us kissing behind my car. I think you know what this is, Michael said quietly. I hired a private investigator. I opened my mouth, but no sound came. How long? He demanded, voice low and seething. How long have you been sleeping with my wife? Tears pricked my eyes. Michael, how long, Claire? He barked, slamming his hand on the desk. I jumped. A few months, I whispered, choking on shame. He inhaled sharply. Unbelievable, he muttered. He paced, then turned back to me, face contorted. I welcomed you into my company, treated you like a protege, and this is how you repay me? By crawling into my wife's bed. His words cut deep, but anger flared too. Sir, with all respect, you don't own Eve, I said quietly. You're right, this shouldn't have happened. But if she found happiness with me, it's because something was wrong in your marriage. He looked as if I had slapped him. For a moment, I thought he might hit me. Instead, he pointed at the door. You're fired, he said, voice shaking. Get your things and get out. And Claire. I paused, hand on the nog, tears spilling. If you so much as think about seeing Evelyn again, I will destroy you. You'll never work anywhere, I'll make sure of it. A flash of defiance went through me. I understand that you can't force someone to love you, I said, voice trembling but audible. His eyes blazed. I fled the office, heart in my throat. Down at my desk, I hastily threw a few personal items into a box. The office was deserted, thankfully. In a daze, I walked out. Dusk was falling, and a hot wind had picked up. I collapsed into the driver's seat, sobbing. I'd lost my job and probably torched my career. But the worst of it was worrying about Eve. Had Michael confronted her too? Was she safe? I tried calling. No answer. I texted. He knows. I'm so sorry. Are you okay? No reply. With mounting panic, I realized I couldn't just sit and wait. I had to go to her. Don't forget, more stories like this are waiting. Subscribe now to Sapphic Tales before we continue. I drove too fast to their house. It was dark when I turned onto their quiet street. Michael's car was in the driveway. I parked down the block and ran. As I crept up to the front window, I saw them in the living room. Eve was on the couch, face in her hands. Michael was pacing, shouting. Then he grabbed her arm and yanked her up. She cried out. That was all I needed to see. I burst through the door. Let her go, I shouted. Michael spun, still gripping her. Eve's tear-streaked face went slack with shock. Claire, no, she gasped. Please, you shouldn't be here. You have some nerve, Michael snarled, releasing Eve and taking a step toward me. Ruining my marriage and then showing up at my house? He advanced, and I backed up against the wall. Eve rushed between us. Michael, stop, she pleaded. This is between you and me. Leave her out of it. He glared at her. Between you and me? Fine. Then why is she here? He spat. Is this what you want, Eve? You'd throw everything away for her. Eve was shaking, but she stood her ground. I'm not throwing anything away, she cried. You threw it away. You haven't loved me in years. He looked shocked, then scoffed. I gave you a good life. And this is how you repay me? By humiliating me? With another woman. Eve's voice dropped, suddenly calm. I'm sorry, Michael. I truly am. But I'm done living a lie. You and I, we haven't been happy for a long time. His eyes flickered. Pain, then, it flickered, and for a moment I saw pain beneath his anger. But then he shook his head and pointed at me. And you think she can make you happy? She's half your age. That wasn't true. I was in my late 20s, only a decade younger than Eve, but he was beyond reasoning, and she has nothing to offer you that I haven't given. Eve stepped back from him and, to my surprise, took my hand. She laced her fingers firmly with mine and raised her chin. She loves me, Eve said. And I love her. That's something you can't give me. Michael stared at us at our joined hands. For an instant, I almost felt sorry for him. He looked utterly lost. Then he lunged forward with a furious growl, reaching for me. Eve screamed no and tried to intervene. In the chaos, he shoved her aside and his hand struck the side of my face as I ducked. I stumbled, catching myself on the hallway table. A vase toppled and shattered on the floor. Eve ran back to Michael, grabbing his arm. Stop. Please, she sobbed, pulling him away from me. If you ever loved me, just stop. Michael froze, breathing hard. I pressed a hand to my stinging cheek, stepping in front of Eve in case he lashed out again. But his eyes were fixed on Eve's tearful face. Something in her words or her voice seemed to break him. The fight drained out of him, and his shoulders sagged. You want to go with her? He asked quietly, an almost pathetic tremor in his voice. Eve nodded, tears streaming. I'm sorry, she whispered. But yes. A long silence hung between the three of us, broken only by Eve's soft sobs. Michael swallowed, his gaze distant. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out the front door. A moment later, I heard his car engine roar to life and speed away into the night. Eve let out a cry of relief and collapsed into my arms. I held her tightly as she shook with sobs. My own tears fell into her hair. It's okay, I murmured, cradling her. It's over. It's over. We sank to the floor right there in the foyer, amidst the broken vase and scattered flowers. I rocked her gently, trying to soothe both of us. We stayed like that until our breathing steadied and the shock began to wear off. Eventually, I pulled back to look at her. Her face was red and blotchy, but I thought she'd never looked more beautiful because she was free. I realized we were free. We should go, I whispered. I don't know if he'll come back. Eve nodded, wiping her eyes. She stood, and I helped her upstairs. In the dark bedroom, she hurriedly threw some clothes into a duffel bag. She paused only once to look around the room at the neatly made bed, the photos on the dresser. Then she turned away and walked out, shutting the door without a word. I took her hand as we left the house together. We got into my car, and as we pulled away, both of us were silent, watching that big house recede in the rearview mirror. Eve reached over and took my hand again, gripping it tightly. I held on just as hard. We drove away into the night, leaving behind the life that had kept us apart. Whatever uncertainty lay ahead, at least we had freedom, and we had each other. In the weeks that followed, we began to rebuild. Eve initiated divorce proceedings with Michael. It was messy and emotional, but she remained firm. We stayed at my small apartment at first, which became our refuge. Waking up with her beside me each morning felt like a gift I never expected. Without a job, I worried about my future, but Eve kept reassuring me we'd figure it out together. She faced gossip and questions, some supportive, others shocked she'd left her husband for a woman. Through it all, we leaned on each other. Every challenge felt surmountable as long as we didn't face it alone. In time, things settled. Eve found a position with a foundation she loved. I eventually landed a job with another company where my past didn't matter. We moved out of my tiny apartment and found a place of our own, a cozy little rental with a small garden. For the first time, home felt truly like home because we were together. Some evenings, we'd cook dinner side by side, bumping hips playfully and marveling that we could do something so ordinary together. A few months later, Eve and I attended a charity event together, this time openly as partners. We walked in arm. There were curious glances, but also warm smiles. That night, under the soft lights, we even dared to dance together. A slow song began, and Eve took my hand, guiding me to the floor. She rested her head on my shoulder as we swayed. My heart overflowed seeing the peaceful smile on her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" I asked. "For loving me. For helping me find myself again." Tears pricked my eyes. "You don't have to thank me for that," I murmured, giving her a soft kiss in front of everyone. We both blushed and laughed as we left the floor, holding each other close. Later that night, at home, we curled up on the couch, pleasantly tired. Our old cat jumped up into our laps. The house was filled with the comfortable silence of home. Eve tilted her head up to look at me. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "Regret what?" "Us. How we got here. Everything it put you through." I thought about it, about the pain, the people we'd hurt, the uncertainty. But I also thought of the incredible warmth of waking up beside the person I love every morning and how alive I feel now. "Not for a single second," I whispered. She smiled, and a tear of relief slipped down her cheek. I kissed it away and held her tighter. My boss's wife fell in love with me, and yes, everything changed. We had lost some things along the way, but what we gained was far more precious. We found love, and we found freedom. Every struggle had been worth it. Everything had changed, and it changed for the better. Neither of us would have it any other way. If it kept you hooked, subscribe now to Sapphic Tales so you never miss the next.